The following presentation contains content that will offend the virtue signaling of both the left and the right, and may be a very fake threat to the fake news of our fake democracy. Viewer discretion is advised.
Nope. Fuck that. No. Worship me.
Paradigm Shift.
An educational comedy.
It's not a cause, not a movement.
It's not a social group you can slap a label onto.
It's an idea. It's an intention.
It's an intuition.
A mindset in which reality can be explored.
For genuine expression,
Discernment.
critical thinking, and imagination.
To look inward upon ourselves.
To better understand the external world around us.
And yes,
Few egos are bound to be bruised.
With our silly, zany, politically incorrect,
George Carlin and Bill Hicks style of going about things.
real and raw honesty.
Which invites you to be
To the fullest.
Hello everybody and welcome to yet another insane edition of Paradigm Shift and Educational Comedy. I'm Dave Kelso and we have here with us Richard Hamilton and Jasamine Martin. And so today we are going to be talking about censorship, decentralization, and cryptocurrency. Because these are three very, very important things that need to be discussed. And I feel that they need to be discussed in a way that I don't see them talked about as much as they should in certain contexts. I'm not going to be talking about censorship as its own separate topic, but rather why decentralized networking and cryptocurrency are two very important key things for combating censorship. Because if you have a fully decentralized network, then it's difficult to nearly impossible to censor. Because, I'm not going to go in a big, long rant about exactly, what everything is and isn't. I mean, there's going to be some details. I'm going to go into a screen share mode and share about some of this stuff. But this episode basically expects the viewer to at least know a little bit of a thing or two about this already, to basically know what decentralized technology is. So, anyway, the main problem that really isn't being addressed is that all the decentralized technology that's being used, whether you're talking about Steemit, whether you're talking about mines, whether you're talking about IPFS, or whatever it is that you're talking about, it's only half decentralized. It's not fully decentralized. Because not only is the front end that you use to access the back end decentralized network, not only is the front end bottlenecked with centralization, but if the powers who assume they be want to take your ass down, as we've already seen with websites like Gab, all they have to do is cut your ass off at the domain name level, because the big tech scumbags that, run all of the infrastructure also run all of the domain name services. And, as we've seen, people have even been utterly demonetized and wiped out by having payment processors removed and things like that. You've got Stripe and PayPal kind of cucking Patreon And of course, the big top monopolies that absolutely hate competition are in direct control of Stripe and PayPal. So if these big boys want to take somebody down, whether it's Sargon of Akkad or who it is, there's a whole number of people that have been utterly, removed from Patreon. All Stripe and PayPal have to do is put pressure on Patreon and say, hey, we want this guy gone, we want that guy gone, we want this girl gone, so on and so forth, and poof, all of a sudden they're gone. So, now these people have no way of making money. Then when you have a competing service, like for example Subscribestar comes up, and it's a Patreon-ish type of similar service, so they're like an alternative to Patreon. So all the people that got kicked off of Patreon were going to Subscribestar, but Subscribestar, just like Patreon, is only an intermediary. So they still need to have payment processors such as Stripe and PayPal. So again, through Stripe and PayPal, the big boys say, oh, we don't like Subscribestar competing with Patreon. We want an absolute and total monopoly on what can be done. So PayPal and Stripe withdrew themselves from Subscribestar. Now, recently, Subscribestar has started to slowly come back up. I'm not exactly sure how they've done this. There's not enough information out. Rumor has it they've gotten some other payment processor somehow. Similar to how Gab went back online because they were able to find a domain host that actually believes in freedom of speech, doesn't believe in censorship, and they realize what the mainstream is doing. So that domain provider is backing Gab and saying, hey, them and anybody like them are completely welcome on our service. And good luck trying to take down a domain registrar. Yeah, just good fucking luck. You're not going to do it. So it's cool that at the very least we've got one domain registrar that, for the moment at least, is on the side of the people. So that's cool. But the point is that no matter what kind of decentralized technology you may or may not be using, they can hit your ass monetarily. So, I mean, everything in this world right now requires money to run. So they can hit your ass monetarily to make sure that you can't have commerce exchange. You can't get paid by people. You can't pay people. You can't do commerce. You can't pay for your hosting or anything like that. So they can fuck you that way. And then on top of it, the domain registrars can come in and remove your domain name. So it is a big, huge, massive problem. Just like BitChute, which is a competitor of YouTube, which also uses decentralized technology. They haven't gotten hit at the domain level yet or anything, but Stripe and PayPal pulled out from BitTube, and Patreon eliminated BitChute's Patreon account. So BitChute tried switching to Subscribestar, and then, Stripe and PayPal pulled out from Subscribestar. So, it's just, it brings a very clear message that the big corporations are saying, no, fuck you. We run your life. We don't want fair competition. We're going to call it a free market, but that's actually virtue signaling, because what the capitalist market has turned into is, instead of a free market, you bow to us. We are your gods. We are the big 5 or 10 or however many it is. Fuck you. You run your life according to what we want. You shut your mouth, or we're going to take you down. We're going to starve your family. We're going to make sure you can't get paid. We're going to make sure you can't do business. And like people have said, the next step in this is what happens when the regular average person can't open a bank account or can't get a credit card because, oh, we don't like what you posted on Facebook. So, service denied. So it's like we're moving straightforward into stupid. And so these things need to be addressed and stopped. And if the front end is as decentralized as the back end, and you have systems of decentralized DNS, then basically with decentralized DNS, what you're doing is on the different decentralized platform, you're making it so that there's a DNS service that it's free by default if no one controls it, no one owns it, no one runs it. So basically, any domain name, as long as it's not taken, you can then go ahead and claim it as your own. And with decentralized DNS, what network you're running off of through what domains is then also determined by, what comes, before the ://. And I will get into more illustration with that when I move over to screen share. Now, with the cryptocurrency, even the big cryptocurrencies, whether you're talking about Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever, they're still dominated by the big top corporations that are controlling everybody. So what somebody came up with the idea for is something called an SMT, or a social media token, which currently social media tokens have to be based upon a particular type of blockchain technology. So, for example, there are tokens that are based on Bitcoin. Minds has the Minds token that is based on Ethereum. BitChute has recently started their own token blockchain called a Chute token, and I'm not exactly sure what that's based on. But one thing that needs to happen, this needs to be turned into a more equity-based system. And in order to really fulfill that, these tokens need to eliminate their dependency on the mainstream controlled, Ethereum, Bitcoin, etc., and they need to unite into their own economy. So I've kind of had an idea for something called an EUT, or a Universal Exchange Token, and I'll be getting more into how that works as well. I've drawn up some stuff to outline that. I've also drawn up some stuff to outline the decentralized networking stuff. So yeah, hopefully so far everybody can basically see the basic point that I'm getting at. We as wonderful as decentralized networking is, as wonderful as cryptocurrency is, it is still only half decentralized. It's not fully decentralized, and even the private SMT tokens, as wonderful of an idea as it is to base the value of a token and the exchange rate of a token on social media activity, which is like a totally new, phenomenal concept. Even as well and wonderful as all that is, it is still hooked too much into these mainstream semi-centralized bottlenecks, to where the powers that be can still drop the axe on you if they get too aggravated with you. So we need to be able to detach from that, so that they don't have the ability to stick their dick where it doesn't belong. So before I go into any sort of screen shares and overviews and specifics of these things, Richard, do you have any comments you want to make about these situations?
Well, I am currently looking right now, because I know I did a journal on this topic not too long. Well, it was at least a year ago. I'm just looking here. Okay, this is bloody weird, because I know I did a here we go. Propaganda Game Sesame Credit. There it is. Okay, I'm going to go to screen share.
Okay, so one of you recently brought this to our attention, and when we first started looking into it, we couldn't believe it. Even now, looking at this, I keep thinking that there's gotta be something about this that I just don't understand. Like, I must be reading this wrong. It's just so clearly something out of dystopian science fiction, and yet, here it is in our world, and people are actually embracing it. Apparently, China has gamified being an obedient citizen. Going under the innocuous name of Sesame Credit, China has created a score for how good a citizen you are. And that's one of the scariest things I've heard in quite a while. It's jointly run by Tencent, yes, that Tencent, the one that owns Riot Games and has a significant share in Epic and Activision Blizzard, and also the ascendant Chinese competitor to Amazon, Alibaba, hence the name Sesame. So the owners of China's largest social networks have partnered with the government to create something akin to the US credit score. But instead of measuring how regularly you pay your bills, it measures how obediently you follow the party line. They dredge data from your social network, so if you post pictures of Tiananmen Square or share a link about the recent stock market collapse, your Sesame credit score goes down. Share a link from the state-sponsored news agency about how good the economy's doing, and your score goes up. But Alibaba and Tencent are also the largest online retailers in China, so Sesame Credit is also able to pull data from your purchases. If you're making purchases the state deems valuable, like work shoes or local agricultural products, your score goes up. If you import anime from Japan, though, down the score goes. And this score has real-world consequences. Like many games, Sesame Credit has tiers and levels, and having a high score gives you special benefits, like making it easier to get the paperwork you need to travel, or making it easier to get a loan. Now, currently, there are no consequences for having a low score, but there's been talk about implementing penalties once the system becomes mandatory in 2020. Penalties like slower internet speeds for low-scoring citizens, or even restricting the jobs that a low-scoring person's allowed to hold. But there's one more layer to Sesame Credit, and here's where this goes from being repulsive to downright insidious. Because this is all part of a social network, it also scans your friends. So you will lose points for having friends with low obedience scores. And it tells you this. At any point, anybody can check anyone else's score. And when you check your own score, Sesame Credit provides a handy map of your friends to show you who's dragging your score down. Have you ever had that thing where you play a game with somebody who wasn't doing very well, and you've tried to change their behavior to make them do better? Or maybe after a while you just sort of stopped playing with the people who were holding you back? That's at the heart of how this system works. And it's also what makes this one of the most terrifying tools of authoritarian oppression I've ever read about. Because, like, mass censorship, jail time, assassinations, those are all big, messy implements for keeping a population in line. That messiness and severity foster resentment, eventually rebellion. They're expensive, they're unwieldy. In the end, those tools are impossible to maintain. But social pressure? Ostracization? Those things are free. They happen on their own. And as a government tool, they don't have nearly the same potential for going embarrassingly, disastrously wrong. With a system like this in place, a government doesn't even have to tell neighbor to spy on neighbor, to rat each other out. Because that's all built into a seemingly innocuous game system. The government need not step in. Re-education will be handled for them by friends, classmates, and relatives who want to maintain a high score. And if that doesn't work, then potentially dangerous ideas still end up quarantined by the social isolation this game system causes. Express or help to spread too many radical ideas, and people will stop associating with you. And not because some jackbooted thug showed up at the door with threats, but simply because associating with somebody with those ideas will lose them all the privileges they've worked so hard to obtain. It recontextualizes obedience to an authoritarian regime. In the past, you obeyed such powers because you were afraid. Fear kept you motivated. But fear is negative. It fosters resentment. The world we're stepping into instead uses positive reinforcement to promote being subservient to the will of the regime. It's Big Brother's kinder, gentler hand. And the things that make this scary is that we've seen the efficacy of this only too well in games. You may not actually know this, but when World of Warcraft was in its early stages of development, it had an unrested penalty mechanic that started limiting experience gains for players who had played too much. And players hated it. They resented it and they complained about it every day. So, after brainstorming on this for a while, Blizzard had the idea to simply change how the mechanic was presented. Without changing any of the existing numbers or systems, they started referring to the unrested experience penalty state as normal and made it the default. And they started calling the original normal experience gain state as rested. That's all they changed, and everybody loved it. People would log on every day just to get that bonus. Positive reinforcement works wonders. But unlike World of Warcraft, which built a system just to get people to embrace meaningless grinding, Sesame Credit has built a system to get people to enjoy falling into line. Now, the system's not mandatory yet. It's opt-in right now, but it's going to be mandatory in 2020, and there's a terrible brilliance to phasing that in. The early adopters are going to be people excited about this system, people who are already patriotic and are eager for anything that'll help display that patriotism to the world. And as early adopters, they're going to talk it up. They're going to give it an air of being positive and fun. Then it'll be foisted on the society as a whole. More than that, though, the early adopters are going to compete. Already, you can see hundreds of thousands of tweets displaying people's high scores or showing off the new milestones they've hit, giving hard numbers to their patriotism, and giving them bragging rights for being the most patriotic, most right-thinking person they know. And that's going to set the tone for how Sesame Credit is intended to be used, as a competition to see who can agree with the government the most. We've talked about propaganda games on this channel before, but for all the time we've spent examining and deconstructing terrible games that espouse hate, and for all the studies on propaganda games James has done, this is the use of game systems that frightens me the most. Because to most people, Sesame Credit will seem benign, perhaps even fun. It's a conversation starter, something to share with your friends. But it's making heavy use of all the psychological motivators that we game makers deploy in scoring systems and ladders and levels, systems that we build to shape play habits and to keep people coming back. Like I said, I'm still kind of in a state of disbelief looking at this. If any of you are watching this from China, please tell me if I'm misunderstanding this thing, because I would love to be wrong about it. If not, well, I hope this episode can do some small amount to help the fight to keep such a system from becoming mandatory. For everyone in the rest of the world, I hope this helps remind us all how important it is to be aware and to be vigilant. All of these gamification techniques we've learned through making games offer incredible opportunities for making this world a better, more engaging place. But every great tool carries with it the potential for misuse. And it's on us as a community who understands this amazing new medium to do what we can to stop that. We'll see you next week. Hey everybody, just so you know, the Extra Credits team is going to go on hiatus for the next couple weeks.
So that was published in 2015, or at the very end of 2015, and that was being implemented around 2014, 2015. We're in 2019 now, and 2020 isn't far away. I mean, that's, another 12 months away. And these kind of implications are quite frightening. I mean, not even just what Dave's talking about, but, the next level of that. I mean, this is the next level of that, going beyond just screwing people over because of their opinions, but turning it into a game and, mining people's data. I mean, it takes Facebook, it takes PayPal. I mean, this could be implemented. This sort of stuff could happen, and this is what happens. This is what very well would happen if people became complicit and didn't do anything.
This is a dark day in America, as far as I'm concerned, for any patriot or anyone who believes in a constitutional republic and believes in the rule of law, believes in liberty and justice above all. This type of the tactics deployed, if these people have their way, would make Lavrenti Beria and Stalin and Himmler and the rest of them, embarrassed or proud, let's just say. They would absolutely love to have this type of power. It's a disgrace. It's a disgusting, appalling abuse. It's been systematized, which clearly is run by partisan mercenaries. These people, the evil in them never rests. They are persistent, ruthless, vicious mercenaries, partisan hacks who have taken control of our government, the abuse of power. I have not seen such a railroading. And they're setting the stage. They are asserting their power, the way they operate. And where is the president? Okay, the president has, in my opinion, tweeting, I have to agree with Roger, is not getting it anymore. He needs to, it's unfortunate. He's let it, I think, go too far at this point. It's going to have to go to its natural conclusion. Nobody is off limits. What we're up against, people need to realize this isn't left versus right. This isn't Democrat versus Republican. This is fascist versus freedom fighters. I served in the Berlin Brigade, and I was proud to do so right after the wall came down, and I saw firsthand what Soviet communism and its satellite states and the oppression of socialism looked like. 40 years after the war, there were still bullet-scarred buildings. You would drive through these streets of Potsdam or say, any of these marginal cities outside of West Berlin, and it was a nightmare. It was dark. People didn't even come out of doors. There was no brightness, no life to it. This is what these people sit in, the luxury and the wealth and the opulence of Western capitalism and Western Enlightenment values, and throw stones at it. And I'm almost speechless to put my finger on it. It really can be disconcerting, and I understand how you kind of have to catch yourself sometimes, because those of us who have seen this coming and have tried to warn our fellow citizens and say, look, this isn't a game. This isn't political gamesmanship here. We are talking about ruthless people. It's a literal police state that has co-opted our government, abused our justice system, corrupted every process of government they can, while they install their deep state puppets and minions in there. It boggles the mind, and it's like, where they talk about, like, where are the adults in the room? Where are the righteous people? I mean, they've literally, I think the years of Clinton, Bush, and Obama drained the swamp, literally, well, not drained the swamp, but it rid Washington, D.C. of anybody with any integrity left. They are exactly what we've said they're about all along, which is about power, control, and the ruthless mercenary use of our government, what was once our government, I should say, to carry out the political, personal objectives of ruthless criminals that are living on another planet. They've literally constructed these fantasies in their mind. This is where I question the president's choice in terms of who he's having counsel him, because our government is no longer our own. And when I say our, I mean the people.
If we were to change the world, we would have to change the media. The sordid state of affairs on our planet is largely due to a misguided, misinformed, and deliberately miseducated mass populace. Public opinion and mindset is largely controlled by the mainstream media. To a large extent, this has been the purpose of the mainstream media from a historical context. Much the same can be said for our imposed educational systems, as both have been developed with the specific intention of manipulating the public into believing and supporting a system of enslavement. It is important to recognize that education and media are inextricably linked. In order to truly affect a massive number of people into moving into a creative and constructive pattern of behavior, we need to change the purpose and effect of media as we know it. Our minds have been enslaved by the mind-numbing, repetitive mass media programming that has been put out for consumption by a largely controlled mainstream media global network. Only 4 corporations own all major news networks and the best-selling papers and magazines. Much like the educational institutions, we put unquestionable faith in the media and the versions of reality it portrays. Due to the fact that people put unquestionable faith in the media, it has massive influence over people and can affect them in many ways. The effects of media largely influence the way in which we view and interact with the world. There are several recognizable tactics used to do this, such as priming. In some cases, media messages may cause us to recall old ideas, knowledge, or experience. For example, a news story about the French presidential elections may trigger thoughts about the French economy, or remind one of a past trip to Paris, or to pick up some French brie when doing your grocery shopping. Agenda setting, also known as gatekeeping, refers to the fact that the media controls the information we get, and therefore what we think. Editors have a lot of power here because they are ultimately the ones who decide what we are thinking about. Then there is framing, which refers to the particular treatment, angle, or spin applied to a message, which often ends up shaping our opinions about current affairs and who the good guys are in any situation. Agenda setting is deciding which story to tell, and framing is deciding how to tell them. Most media messages, like adverts and public information campaigns, including news bulletins, are designed to change our attitudes and behavior. Factors that increase the likelihood of success include likability, credibility, or attractiveness of a source, the arguments used, and the people who seem to agree with them. Media also plays a role in persuading people to adopt new ideas or practices. Often, they first communicate the message about the new idea, which then spreads over interpersonal networks, expanding over time to include social leaders, peers, and the community. This eventually leads to the adoption of the idea innovation, reaching a critical mass. In today's world, it is impossible to escape media influence, so what we need to do is to change it, and in so doing, we will change the world.
This is exactly why fully decentralized networking is needed. It doesn't exist yet. It's only half, but this is why fully decentralized networking is needed. So if they try to roll out a tomfuckery system like this, it'll just drive more and more people to be like, hey, fuck you. I'm going over to the fully decentralized systems where, you know, we can get paid in crypto that's not dependent upon Patreon or anything like that. And at that point, you know, you'd have other e-commerce sites where you can buy and sell things, also accepting, you know, the SMT currency along with the real world currency. So it's like you wouldn't be enslaved monetarily, and you wouldn't be enslaved in you know, Chinese communism tomfuckery systems like that, because if they tried to roll it out, everyone's just like, no, I'm going over to the system to where you can't do that. So like that's why this shit is very important. And if fully decentralized technology isn't fully you know, instilled by the time this sort of tomfuckery starts rolling out, it could start to become much harder to then try to develop and roll out fully decentralized technology, because then every time anybody tries to collaborate on doing that, their Sesame credit score just went down because they're trying to do something that the government doesn't like. And yeah, so this makes a very good point.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and you know, it's those sorts of systems that really point out the dangers of misplaced powers and why it's important for people to not be complicit and to start doing the necessary corrective actions in order to make stuff like that a moot point. Because this is where that sort of stuff is where it's all headed. That is where they're pushing for. That is the global agenda. China is on the global model. That's what they want to roll out. And, you know, they want to be able to censor people at will. They want to be able to shut you down just because you said something that they don't like, because they're a bunch of psychopathic control freaks. And they want to make it nearly impossible for anybody to collaborate or to do anything that's against the old power structure. You know, and they're willing to do that through psychologically manipulative means, as in, you know, if you don't do what they want, they'll take away your right to travel outside the country or to even travel outside your county. You know, they'll give you essentially this cyber felony because you dared speak your opinion without a court, without due process, without any form of any legal proceedings whatsoever, and no case made by a prosecutor against you as to why, you know, your privileges were taken away. And, you know, that is indeed why decentralized networking is important more now than ever, because the central system is completely owned and dominated by a handful of technocratic kakistocracy elite tech companies such as Facebook, you know, which owns Instagram. You know, there's Twitter, there's Google, which, as I said in the last episode, you know, in the Year of Light episode, our first episode of this year, you know, it's forced compliance. They force you into the system. And in this country, they're a little bit more cutthroat about it. Facebook doesn't give you an option. It's just like, no, you're going to have it on your phone. I recently got rid of Facebook. This is another update. I got rid of Facebook off my phone, or at least as much as I could. I can't completely get rid of the app because it's built into the phone that I'm being visually seen through, you know, because the camera's better. But it's one of those things when, you know, the apps that you quote unquote think, you know, oh, well, that's kind of cool, it comes with the phone. It really tells you something when you can't even get rid of it off of your phone. It's forced participation, you know, and it's that kind of system like that they're wanting to roll out by 2020, that forced participation. No, you need to be the most patriotic, or otherwise we're going to take away your travel. We're going to take away your ability to do commerce on, you know, Alibaba.com, which would later turn into Amazon. You can't buy, you know, at that point, you know, for doing a video like this, I wouldn't be able to buy a little USB hub because that would make my computing system more effective, and can't have that because that's a threat to them. So therefore they're going to take away my privileges to buy on Amazon until my little patriotism score improves. But the beauty of the community as is right now, there's plenty of people working on it, fortunately, and there is a real push to start this decentralization and to get things moving and to get the ball rolling, because I'm not the only one who sees where things are headed. And overall, it's just really important that we work together as much as we can, collaborate as much as possible, and get this thing rolling before it's too late, because we still have time.
Right now we're in season 2 of the Orville, but in season 1 of the Orville, they actually did an episode on this exact sort of stuff that you're talking about. Basically, the Orville comes across this planet that is like maybe around as technologically advanced, maybe slightly more technologically advanced than 21st century Earth, and it's like a social justice warrior NPC Sesame credit sort of tomfuckery, and just so that people can have an interesting glimpse as to the way this was portrayed, and they might also consider watching the Orville because it is a good show. Let's check out some clips right now as to that episode, so that people can see what hopefully the future will not bring for us here in real life on planet Earth.
The episode I really want to discuss, though, is episode 7, Majority Rule. On an Earth-like planet, every citizen over the age of 18 wears a badge on their shirts with 2 buttons. One is a green upvote button and the other is a red downvote button. In everyday social interactions, people gain or lose social capital and credibility by receiving upvotes or downvotes. The entire culture's legal system is based on public perception, the opinion of the mob. Every decision in society is crowdsourced instead of being based on careful examination, study, investigation, and facts. If a person receives too many downvotes, they will be forced to go on a public apology tour on television where the populace will vote on the sincerity of the individual's plea for forgiveness. If they are successful in keeping their downvote score below 10 million, they will be released into society and effectively forgiven. If their score goes above 10 million, they will be lobotomized. Every citizen seems obsessed with engaging in shallow and superficial moral grandstanding so as to appear virtuous and self-righteous. So it's very common for people to pull out their phones and begin filming other people for the slightest inappropriate or indecent public behavior. Such videos that go viral allow the viewing public to pass moral judgment on anyone and decide who should be downvoted en masse at any time. There's even a stigma against individuals who have too many downvotes. In some instances, certain businesses won't do business with a person who has a high downvote total. As you can see, this story is an excellent critique and an extreme satire on the modern social media outrage culture we're currently living in. How many celebrities or people in the public eye, like politicians, have faced abnormally high levels of online criticism for something benign that they've said or done because some triggered snowflakes believe it was offensive, and then they're pressured by the mob to apologize? But of course, as we know, the psychopathy of these witch hunts doesn't come with forgiveness or empathy or even a modicum of compassion for the accused. It's about power. It's about the addictive and irresistible power to destroy another human being. The mob will not be happy until the wrongdoer is destroyed financially and in terms of their reputation. A person can apologize sincerely all day long. The crowd will still call for their resignation. Their entire career must be destroyed for one small slip of the tongue. This is a ridiculously unrealistic standard that we hold people to. As if these same witch hunters haven't said or done things in their own jobs that others might find offensive. The difference is that when something is said in the public eye, it's amplified, magnified, and blown insanely out of all proportion. A recent example of this would be the Irish media's reaction to an Australian Minister for Consumer Affairs in the Parliament of Victoria, Marlene Carouse. From the RTE website, she issued the apology after making the comments at an awareness campaign about unlicensed tradesmen on the 29th of October. She faced calls to apologize after her comments were aired on a local television news report in Melbourne. The report showed a clip of Miss Carews speaking at the event where she said, "If anybody knocks on your door that has an Irish accent, automatically ask them to leave." Her comments were branded as blatantly racist by members of the Irish community in Australia. She faced a storm of criticism on the Irish Around Sydney Facebook group, which has more than 40,000 members. One user commented, "How can this get approved to air on TV? Pure racism against the Irish, it's a disgrace." She was referring to a building scam campaign being run in Australia by backpackers from the UK and Ireland. The television report featured a 79-year-old woman who had paid $4,500 Australian dollars to tradesmen who said they could fix her leaking roof. However, they took the money from the woman before completing the job. The television report also claimed that the alleged scam artists had Irish accents. As you might imagine, she received immense levels of scorn and vitriol, being branded racist, despite many Australians having Irish and British ancestry, and Irish actually not being a race but a nationality. Yes, you could argue that it is, given that Irish people largely come from Gaelic stock, like Scots and Welsh people, but anyway, maybe I'm just being pedantic here. Anyway, the point is, Twitter went nuts. Everyone claimed to be offended, and many people demanded she lose her job. Why? Here's the thing. I'm Irish, born and raised, and I'm as ginger as Coppercap. And I wasn't offended because my skin isn't made of tissue paper. What she said was carelessly worded perhaps, but it wasn't technically wrong. If it's true that these scammers have Irish accents, then we have to accept that fact whether we like it or not. That doesn't mean all Irish people all over Australia are suddenly demonized, and it doesn't mean Irish people aren't welcome there anymore. And now we have the independent.ie publishing horseshit like this. Irish ties to Australia couldn't be greater, embassy claims, following minister's racist remarks. Are we this immature and sensitive that the words of one politician in Australia could theoretically run the risk of damaging international relations between two countries with already very strong cultural and historical bonds? I mean, were people actually this dumb and emotionally driven that they were concerned that Australian and Irish relations could be severely negatively impacted by the words of one woman? The point is, people are looking for outrage. They're looking to find fault with people so as to pass moral judgment. People want to be offended because it gives them power, and feelings come first over facts. Her comment, "If anybody knocks on your door that has an Irish accent, automatically ask them to leave," is taken out of context. She was talking about illegal tradesmen. She wasn't talking about all Irish people. She apologised to the baying mob with this: "Recent scammers have been backpackers from the UK and Ireland, and I was giving this info to the public. I admit I delivered this message poorly," which I think is a very reasonable thing to say. But honestly, what does it say about us as a society if the mainstream media believes that the unhinged fury of easily triggered Twitter snowflakes qualifies as news, and therefore public condemnation and moral judgment should follow accordingly? What does it say about an unforgiving society that we don't tend to accept apologies and demand that punitive action should be taken against a genuinely apologetic person? You castigate and racially profile an entire nation that is a friend and ally of Australia and excuse it by poor delivery. Shame on you. She didn't castigate or racially profile anyone. The reality is, whether you like it or not, these scammers came from Ireland, and so what bloody accents do you expect them to have? She was making a public service announcement. She could have said, and probably should have said, something like this: "We know these scammers have come from Ireland and some from the UK. We urge homeowners to be vigilant," and then just leave it up to the public to decide. Unfortunately, her choice of words was poor, but just because you feel her words were bigoted and racist doesn't actually mean they were. Intent matters. Her intention clearly wasn't to be racist or bigoted, but it was interpreted that way. These people are behaving like social justice warriors and are deliberately applying an incorrect intention and interpretation of this minister's words. They did the same thing to George Hook recently, and his advice was actually good and sensible. In a world where every single word a person says in public is recorded and available for intense scrutiny, if you want to find something to complain about in the actions and words of others, I guess it's not hard to find. Remember, only the people who are offended are likely to comment and complain about this on Twitter. Very few people are going to be bothered to go to Marlene Carews' Twitter and say, "Hey Marlene, I wasn't offended by your remarks, just so you know. Cheers, all the best." So a vocal minority of very loud users are going to make it seem as if this is a bigger situation than it actually is, because the mainstream media still doesn't understand how to gauge the importance of certain types of communications and interactions on social media. The idea that a person could lose their job and be made unemployable because of irreversible damage to their reputation, it's actually terrifying and deeply disturbing. Seth MacFarlane has crafted a brilliant cautionary tale exploring this social media phenomenon to an exaggerated degree and perhaps forcing some people to take a good long look at themselves. Majority Rule as an episode explains what happens to a society when it becomes obsessed with being offended as a source of social capital and places feelings over facts. There's even a very tongue-in-cheek remark at the end of the episode when they're attempting to manipulate the feed with false data to save one of their crewmates. Dr. Finn asks, what if these people try to corroborate all this information? To which the native girl replies, don't worry, they won't. And though that's certainly a funny dig at fake news on social media, given the severity of the punishment to a person's reputation, it should also be an alarming one. Moral puritanism, pearl-clutching emotional outrage, and mass hysteria are rife on social media today. The people who engage in these kinds of witch hunts won't realize the horrific effect they have on a person's life until the mob turns on them. It's strange that these same people will probably harp on about things like love, not hate, tolerance, not intolerance, diversity and not exclusion, and yet something so simple and innocent as a mistake, a poor choice of words, a minor error in judgment, is enough to set them into a rage-filled hissy fit of infantile proportions and seething contempt and hatred for another human being. Anyway, I know this wasn't really a review and more of a ramble related to an episode of The Orville, but it was one very special episode. It was a Black Mirror-esque commentary on an aspect of our society that we really should consider more. This was a genuinely thought-provoking hour of science fiction, and one I really enjoyed.
Yeah. So that was really fucking creepy, to say the least. So,
indeed.
Yeah. So let's hope that planet Earth isn't going to go down the same track as planet SJW in the Orville universe, because that would just be new.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. I'm going to move over to screen share mode so that I can, show everybody some of the things that I put on DeviantArt about this to add even more clarification as to what I was talking about earlier. However, before I go into screen share mode, seeing as we are doing this through Skype, and as you said, we can edit and insert and all sorts of stuff, just like we did on the last PSEC episode. You made a suggestion of when we do it this way, and it's not an actual live stream, that we kind of get a bit creative about it and insert what you might call a fake commercial break, like all these funny like spoof commercials and stuff. They're not real commercials, they're just for the lulz. So we're gonna take a fake commercial break, old school retro style, and we'll be back after these messages.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
Fuck you, Baltimore!
If you're dumb enough to buy a new car this weekend,
you're a big enough schmuck to come to Big Bill Hell's Cars.
Bad deal.
Cars that break down.
Thieves.
If you think you're gonna find a bargain at Big Bill,
you can kiss my ass.
It's our belief that you're such a stupid motherfucker.
You'll fall for this bullshit.
Guaranteed.
If you find a better deal,
shove it up your ugly ass.
You heard us right.
Shove it up your ugly ass.
Bring your tray.
Bring your title.
Bring your wife.
We'll fuck her.
That's right, we'll fuck your wife.
Because at Big Bill Hell,
you're fucked 6 ways from Sunday.
Take a hike
to Big Bill Hell,
home of challenge pissing.
That's right,
challenge pissing.
How does it work?
If you can piss 6 feet in the air straight up and not get wet,
you get no down payment.
Don't wait.
Don't delay.
Don't fuck with us or we'll rip your nuts off.
Only at Big Bill Hell,
the only dealer that tells you to fuck off.
Hurry up, asshole.
This event ends the minute after you write us a check.
And it better not bounce or you're a dead motherfucker.
Go to hell.
Big Bill Hell's Cars,
Baltimore's filthiest
and exclusive home of the meanest sons of bitches in the state of Maryland.
Guaranteed.
I guess we'll have to eat this boring oatmeal.
It's a trap!
Wow, Admiral Akbar! Wow, Admiral Akbar cereal!
Colorful marshmallows!
Your tongues can't repel flavor of that magnitude.
There's a prize in every box.
Admiral Akbar cereal, now with brine shrimp.
What the f*** is this?
Oh, that's what you could have been saving if you had Geico.
Geico? Who wants Geico?
Oh no, I am not stepping on you.
It's the money you could be saving with Geico. Even after this commercial ends, he'll be here waiting. He just wants you to save money.
Tell me who's watching.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
I do like a party.
Come on, Pooh.
You said we'd be together forever.
I'm not going anywhere.
You know what'll happen if you do.
I made an oath.
When are you gonna grow up, Christopher? They're not real. They're just dolls.
They were always real to me. You were given a second chance. Just enjoy your life. I've been having those strange dreams again.
Was it him?
Pooh, you made up what oath, Christopher?
Oh, what to do, what to do.
What to do indeed!
Pooh!
Your soul is mine, Christopher.
No! This can't be happening. No, see, the tree, it's just a tree.
You can't run forever.
You're not real.
Oh, bother.
Why can't you just leave me alone?
Where I come from, a promise is a promise. You wouldn't want something to happen to your family.
Fine, I'll do what I must. It appears as though I'm stuck.
Have you been eating honey without me, Christopher?
It's been so long.
Upside down, inside out, down the river is where we drown.
You're next. No! Where's Tigger?
It's time, Christopher. Time for the great sacrifice.
You know, I'd love to stay, but I must be going.
So soon, Christopher? Don't worry, Piglet. He won't leave us again. I'll make sure of it. Look who it is.
You're the Pooh Bear.
Would you like to be my friend?
Yes.
Come with us. Oh, God.
Why just the boy? Let's kill the whole family.
Blood.
Kill them.
They'll all suffer.
We'll kill them all! What are you doing in the kitchen? There's no honey in here.
Blood is sweeter than honey.
Sore throat, coughing. Is anybody else out there maybe got Ebola?
I do.
Ebola!
Hey, honey. What's for breakfast this morning?
Nigga, please.
Hey, can't you just tell me what's for breakfast?
Nigga, please.
Introducing the tasty new breakfast cereal that's so nutty and crunchy, you'll say,
Nigga, please.
Hey, Joey, it's some good cereal. What is it? Nigga, please. Nigga, please. Nigga, please.
Nigga, please.
packed with vitamins, but so tasty, even kids will say,
More nigga, please, please.
a high-fiber blend of 7 all-natural grains, oats, barley, and almonds, deep-fried and coated with a sugary barbecue sauce.
Ask for it by name.
Nigga, please.
From the makers of Cracker Ass Crackers.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host, famous model Joy Ree.
Being a model is very difficult.
So beautiful.
Getting a pampered and photographs? Not easy.
Hashtag no filter.
When working on the TVs or movie sets, I get very stressed out. That's why I make Joy Pang Pangs.
Big movie star, yeah! Introducing Joy Pang Pangs. It's the funny packer that help you work out. It's packing heat. Super charged. So fashionable and it work you out. Gotta be expensive, right? That's where you're so wrong. You'll get it all for only $20,000. Work out your abdominals and relieve the stress. Clean the house. Read a book. Order more pang-pangs. Never takes it off. So it works 100%.
If you don't get one, sooner or later, you will become very fatso.
Oh, real body so nice. Oh, no, what happened? Should have bought one. Joy Pang Pang, pack a punch.
Joy Pang Pang is a work so fast, it slim you down all the fats from your knees and your butt. Keep everything nice and tight.
Hey, Fatso, I bet you're eating a pizza right now, getting so fat. Wow, you really let yourself go.
But that's not all the Pang Pang does. It also helps you with constipation.
The constant flow of vibration simulates a mud butt and make you poop so faster. Let's see what's under the hood. Joy Pang Pang pumping out 28,000 RPMs. Oh, I'm just gonna set my soup down right here. Oh my God, Pang Pang, someone help me. It's gonna fucking blow. Time to get the fucking rip. Joy Pang Pang is taking over the whole world. Ew, gross. Fat girl, I'm going to be sick. Are you pregnant? Or is that just fupa? You need Pang Pang to burn away the fat. Oh no, I'm being defeated. Curse you, Pang Pang.
Buy 2 Pang Pang and you can lose weight twice as fast.
Put one on each ass chicken. It goes all over. Your thigh, your knee, your back. Fuck. Oh, is that a new backpack? No, it's just Pang Pang. Important business meeting? Family coming over? No problem. It's time to crank it up. I have returned. Oh, fuck, not again. No, fuck you, Pang Pang.
So as you can see, the Pang Pang is revolutionary. But don't just take a listen to me. Let's see what people really think of the Joy's Pang Pangs. I just love using the Pang Pang. It's so comfortable, and I barely even notice it's on. Pang Pang number 1.
I put it on my balls. Kinda hurts, but I like it.
Hello, good to see you. Joy Pang Pang is the right one. Use it to bring fun feeling to your family and to yourself.
Joy Pang Pang!
Back to the show.
Welcome back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that pseudo old school tomfuckery of awesomely fake, hilarious, politically incorrect commercials. So, moving on with some screen sharing of my own. Decentralized networking for dummies. We're gonna be reviewing 2 little article things that I made, but decentralized networking for dummies is the first one. And as you can see, this is centralized, this is decentralized, and you know, we kind of see the premise there. Introduction. Richard, would you like to read or shall I? I don't care who's the narrator in this.
Oh, you can go ahead and read.
All right. Introduction. Most people have heard about decentralized networking at this point. However, for the average semi-technical to completely non-technical person, there's been quite a bit of confusion surrounding the topic. It has been spoken of as the salvation of the internet, and perhaps even humanity itself in many ways, that somehow it is immune to most, if not all, of the failings and troubles of the current centralized networking technologies, including, but not limited, to making censorship impossible and giving agency and security to all data. And yet, every platform to use this technology so far appears, at first glance, to not be enjoying the benefits that are claimed about the technology. Censorship is still on the rise, and decentralized platforms appear to have provided absolutely zero remedy to anything. In addition, decentralized technology appears to have created a completely new set of problems to overcome. So people then ask themselves, what am I missing here? Has decentralized networking been falsely advertised? Or is there more to this story that I might not be aware of? The good news is that the answer to that question is the latter, not the former. A failure to explain decentralized networking in a more simplified form has been the cause of the confusion. Or as the old movie quote says, "It seems to me like what we have here is a failure to communicate." It has taken me most of 2018 to understand the technology well enough to even begin to figure out how to explain these things in a way that won't make people's eyes gloss over. I'm finally at that point, and so this is why this journal entry can finally come into existence. Just to warn you, simple and easy to understand does not always mean short and sweet, and it absolutely does not mean short and sweet in this case either. Detail provides clarity, whereas being vague provides confusion. The details must simply be described using language that the average person can understand. Though I cannot avoid using some technical terms, I will, however, explain what those terms mean using simple English, or at the very least, as simple of English as one can manage when speaking about technology. Most people these days at least understand the basics. They understand the difference between wired and Wi-Fi, they have a basic comprehension of what a domain name is, and that the domain name points to a hosting space on a server someplace. Most people understand what a server is, just a computer sitting in an office or data center somewhere that provides the content to other computers that connect to it. So anyone with these types of basic understandings shouldn't find my explanations too challenging to grasp. Frame of reference. Now I'm going to explain the basics of both centralized and decentralized networking so that you are able to easily compare the similarities and differences. I'll start with centralized networking. The primary device that is directly connected to the internet via a single computer or router is assigned what is called an IP version 4 address. IP stands for Internet Protocol. The version 4 is telling you that the address consists of 4 sets of numbers that are separated by a period, i.e., for example, 23.125.67.12, hypothetical. These addresses are necessary so that the internet knows where data is coming from and where data is going. You can compare this to the mailing addresses and return address on a snail mail envelope. Seeing as most people would find it too challenging to remember a bunch of crazy numbers, servers have domain names that point to the IP address because names are much easier for most humans to remember than a series of numbers. Just like with telephone numbers, it is easier to remember that your friend's name is Joseph than to remember what his phone number is. So centralized networking uses a name which links to a numeric address which belongs to a physical computer sitting in a room someplace that is storing content, and also has software which allows other computers to access that content. Networks based around a central location have the vulnerability of a central point of failure, which is simultaneously a central point of control. In other words, chop off the head and the body dies. This leaves the network vulnerable to denial of service attacks, parentheses, which basically means hammering the living shit out of it and clogging up the data pipe so bad that no one can connect to it. And also leaves the users of the network vulnerable to abuses in the event that those who run the network happen to be major douchebags. As per this little meme that I created below, one is an insidious, transhumanistic, parasitic, totalitarian technology designed to strip biological life forms of their individuality and link them into one collective hive mind hell-bent on domination and supremacy, and the other is the Borg. When a network starts to have more users on it than the infrastructure can handle, then the connection to it can continue to become slower and more bogged down until the end result is similar to a denial of service attack, only this is caused by overload and not by malicious intent. As the internet continues to become larger, it is pretty clear as to how centralized networking becomes an increasingly catastrophic dumpster fire. Whereas centralized networking is structured based on the physical location of a single physical computer, decentralized networking is structured based on the location of the content on the network. And that content is not exclusively stored on any one single computer. Though there are many types of decentralized networking formats, which all have their charms and shortcomings, I'm going to use IPFS, Interplanetary File System, as an illustration because I feel it will allow me to make the explanation more simple than it would have otherwise been. When a file is uploaded to IPFS, it is smashed into tiny redundant pieces that are scattered across the entire network. So all the computers on the network act like tiny parts of one massive global hard drive. This means the data on the network is immutable. Once uploaded, it will remain there for as long as humans exist to have an internet. When you edit data on the network, you're not truly making any changes to it. What happens is a newer copy of that data is created that is the most updated version of that data. The newest copy is always what is displayed unless someone goes out of their way to dig for earlier versions. Then of course I did this nice little funny. When a single NPC is deleted, it is a tragedy. When an entire hard drive fails, it is a statistic. General failure while reading drive C. Obviously, a bit of a Stalin spoof meme there. If you want files to be private on IPFS, you need to secure them with encryption. If you want anonymity on the network, you'll need to encrypt your connection to it. IPFS in and of itself is fully transparent and thus provides no privacy, which is why the before mentioned methods would need to be utilized in unison with IPFS. IPFS nodes don't need domain names to speak to each other. They just use the before mentioned IP address system. This is all well and fine for the network communicating with itself, but for humans accessing the decentralized network, we are going through centralized networking on the front end to access decentralized networking on the back end. It is kind of like having a hole in your gas tank. The front-end software which accesses the decentralized IPFS network is still centralized on a server which resides at an IP address that a domain name points to, and so it is still vulnerable to both attack and overload. Even though it is impossible to censor data on the decentralized network itself, it is quite an easy thing to remove front-end access to a domain name that is accessing that network simply by falsely accusing the site owner of hate speech and being a terrorist, bigot, or whatever, and magically the domain name no longer allows you to access that site anymore. All of that site's data still exists on the decentralized network, you just have no means of getting to it. Insert my little meme, identity politics. Any questions? Human intelligence. Domain names operate on a system called DNS, or Domain Name Service. So just like there are web host providers and space providers, there are also domain name providers. And if they really want to fuck you hard, they can at any time if they wish. Hence my little amusing illustration with the BSD Unix devil screwing Tux in the ass, and the BSD Unix devil because Macintosh is Unix based. We've got the little Apple Mac communism in his eyes, and because Android is Linux based, we've got the communist Google Android in Tux's eyes there. So the text says, I am BSD Unix NPC Macintosh loading program Chinese communism, move home USA Linux to home China cucked, operation completed, 0 errors. I am Android Linux NPC Google cuck, program Chinese communism has installed successfully and is currently running, loading, one belt, one road, loading, sesame credit, loading, triggers, ready to be offended. So this is why existing decentralized networks have not as of yet been able to enjoy full speed and efficiency benefits nor have they yet offered any sort of safe haven from mainstream harassment. The solution to the problem is a technology which already exists but is still too primitive for the masses just yet. It is called decentralized DNS. Decentralized DNS. Bringing power to the left of your colon before it gets slashed. As witty and satirical as bringing power to the left of your colon before it gets slashed may sound, it is as seriously literal as it is for the lulz. The decentralized DNS will know what type of network is being used because of what comes before the colon and double slash that begin a URL syntax. You are already well acquainted with syntaxes that begin with things such as HTTP and HTTPS. We see those all of the time on the regular centralized internet. In order for centralized DNS to be fully effective, it would need to be a single container application which simultaneously supports a bunch of different networking protocols. Just like the centralized internet has one single DNS format regardless of what internet protocol you are using, i.e. Discord, Skype, SSH, FTP, HTTP, HTTPS, Telnet, BitTorrent, WebTorrent, and the list goes on and on and on and on. Decentralized DNS will need to be able to do the same thing, otherwise it's not going to be very worthwhile. Though there is no universal routing standard for decentralized DNS just yet, there are some decentralized networks which are test driving the concept. The Beaker DAT network, for example, has dat://domain.extension. The SAFE network has safe://domain.extension. There are other networks which still use HTTPS while also having their own DNS alongside of it, but this concept tends to get messy. Tor is one of them, with their sites ending with star.onion, and I2P is another, with their sites ending with star.I2P. Using these and several other networks as examples, if a solid, universal, decentralized DNS routing system were to be created, then the syntax structure would have to look like this. So we have the Beaker DAT network, dat://domain.extension, Nomad Mines networking, nomad://domain.extension, the SAFE network, safe://domain.extension, Tor Onion network, tor://domain.onion, I2P network, I2P://domain.I2P, Interplanetary File System Network, or IPFS, IPFS://domain.extension. A fully decentralized universal DNS platform would handle domain names the same way it handles content. In other words, anyone can just create the domain they want as long as it's not already taken, with no company having centralized control over domain names. This means that creating domain names would be free. Instead of a domain linking to an IP address, it would link to a network location. Triggered by all of the things. And there's little Trigglypuff. The mainstream knows this just as well as I do. And this is a huge part of why they are flipping their shit. They want to keep us distracted away from focusing on developing a decentralized DNS system because they know that as soon as we do, they are so absolutely fucked. No more hole in the metaphoric gas tank. Though I don't know how long it will take us to get there. I can tell you that developers are working on getting us there. Rome was not built in a day, and everything has its simple, primitive, humble beginnings. Then, and yes, when you look in the description of the video wherever you're accessing this from, especially if you're accessing it from any of my channels, regardless of if it's YouTube or BitChute or BitTube or wherever, there will be a link in the description that goes to a DeviantArt journal that has all of the other relevant links. one of the things you'll be able to find is this very journal that I am reading, I'm showing you right now. And here's the hardcore geek version for decentralized DNS, a concept that I call DDNSRD, a universal standard for Web 3.0, decentralized domain name service router daemon. And little diagrams kind of explain how all of that works. And I put a disclaimer in the middle there that says, please be advised that DDNSRD exists as a concept only. Do not go searching for a software download. You won't find one. DDNSRD is merely something that is possible to exist, and this blueprint has been created with the hope of inspiring creative software developers to move it from the realms of thought form into our real-world physical reality. So if you want to take a closer look at all that, geeky stuff, you can go ahead and follow the links through and do that on your own time. I'm not going to do it here. Similarly, I've got a related content section, about full domain bans, how even as well and wonderful as the idea of Steam is, it's kind of getting cucked a little bit. Of course, the leaked video from the Google meeting, Google domination plot. And of course, it can't happen here, you sure, and the whole, the whole tomfuckery that's happening in the UK and Europe. And of course, now we've got this wonderful Article 13 to contend with that they want to put out in Europe, which of course, when Facebook and Google and all them adopt that for Europe, of course, they're going to shove it right down the rest of our throats. You know that damn well. It's going to be a dumpster fire. So yeah, decentralized network types, and again, you can look at this stuff on your own time. The links will be available. But I've got a bunch of the different types of networks, little videos that give you an overview, an introduction to the safe network, Mine's Nomad blockchain network, interplanetary file system, Beaker DAT network, Holochain, Tor network, I2P network, and yeah, and eventually, as you can see here, what is Mastodon? That's another decentralized network. I plan on adding it into this journal at some point. Just haven't really had the time to do that. So yeah. Before we move things into the realms of discussing the cryptocurrency aspect of all of that good stuff, I am going to see if Richard and or Jasmine have anything that they want to say about all this stuff that we've gone over so far. And first, I'm trying to figure out how in the hell to deactivate the screen share. So yeah, anything either of you want to say on the stuff that that I just presented in regards to what everything is and why this shit is all desperately needed, and hopefully some developers or another out there decide to see this and take it seriously.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to say.
Jasmine, do you have anything to say on it?
I guess kind of referring back to that video that Richard showed, I have a friend who's kind of like that, wanting to is kind of wanting to be on people's good side on the media and just doing certain things, not because, of course they wanted to post it, but there are some things that they, I know there was one funny thing that she found during the sleepover we were having, and she was wondering whether to post it or not. And I I encouraged her to do it because, I mean, she can post what she wants to on there. I know she isn't the dirty she's not a very dirty person at all, so I told her, like, well, if you want to post it, then post it. Don't care if people don't like it. It's like I encouraged her to not worry about what people think about what she posts. She wants to post it, so that's her cut. She can do it. Like, if she likes it, then she can post it. She doesn't have to worry about what other people think about it. But she chose to not post it, even though I could tell she thought it was funny. And, like, she wanted to post it to, she did post it to, like, a few close friends, but, like, on a whole big group platform. I think it was Instagram or something like that. But, yeah. I think on the big platforms like that, I think she's she's kind of insecure on there, which is kind of referring, only proving the point of the video even more, the video that Richard showed.
So you feel she's definitely one of those types of people that Sesame credit type of systems would be taking advantage of and repressing and conforming into this really creepy totalitarian mode of things. Unless, of course,
she's definitely starting to go in that direction.
Yeah,
I can definitely see that.
Unless, of course, there were decentralized platforms that she could shift over to and not have to worry about it. But without those types of platforms in existence, then people like her would definitely be between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
Because then she'd have nowhere else to escape to. There'd be no decentralized freedom network for her to go and post freely. Only these networks that society is pressuring her to get into, and especially as they become more linked into the real world and commerce and finance and jobs and all the creepy stuff that the video was talking about, it would just be really nasty without a decentralized alternative where people could still do their thing and express themselves and make their living and not have to worry about that stuff. So without fully decentralized technology getting underway, then your friend would be one of the many tens of millions of people out there that would fall prey to these insidious totalitarian dumpster fire sort of sick Heil systems.
Yeah, mostly.
Right. Is that all you have to say?
She would mostly fall for it. Yeah, I think that's all I got right now.
Alrighty. Then before we move into the last part of it, the cryptocurrency segments of it, I think we'll inject a little like funny, amusing, politically incorrect song segment, like not a commercial break, but maybe some little music video mashups or something like that. I'll figure out exactly what I want to insert, but it'll be topic appropriate. So yeah, we'll be back after these hilarious messages.
Intended's overrated. We'll decide just what you mean. We'll look at that. It's always bad. We're superior, it would seem. Let's build a strong man. Let's victory. And facts are overrated. Feels and screams you count the most. Careers go south, our words shall mouth. In a flash your whole life's a ghost. Let's build a strong man, let's build a strong man. Defeating you and me. We will worship all night to win the fight for moral victory. Feels real good to ban and to censor, to call everyone a Spencer. We'll say Tim plays pool with the alt-right. Just assume that you're afraid of light. We'll see the thoughts you never thought you had. Oh, let's build a strong man. Let's build a strong man. Defeating you and me. We will punch him all night to win the fight for moral victory. Let's build a strong man. Let's build a strong man. And take down Jordan B. We will smear him all night to win the fight for moral victory.
You know we live inside our bubble. Beat you up if you don't agree. Limited vocabularies, NPCs. You cannot understand our blankness. We are blind, we cannot see. With limited vocabularies, NPCs. We're NPCs, NPCs. We're NPCs, NPCs. With limited vocabularies, NPCs. We don't care about our economy, cause we get told what to believe. Limited vocabularies, NPCs. Cause even if you show the data, I would choose not to believe. Limited vocabularies, NPCs. NPCs, 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 well, NPCs. Limited vocabularies, NPCs. NPCs, 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 NPCs. Limited vocabularies, NPCs, yeah. NPCs, 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 well, NPCs. Limited vocabularies, NPCs. Ooh. 'Cause when you wear your red hat, there is nothing more than hate I see. Brainwashed by the social NPCs. I wake up to a caravan. I say, let them in, we should all be free. Even if they kill our children, we're NPCs. Ooh, NPCs, 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 NPCs. Limited vocabulary, NPCs. We're NPCs, 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 NPCs. Limited vocabulary, we're NPCs. Woo!
Madam, we're gonna get through this show whether you like it or not.
Back in the campus, hot as a wire, stealing the reverence, tantruming fire. Woman, you show me, flip me the bed. Tell me it's tasty, my every word. Screaming at the crowd, hear every word and sound fun you. Smells like she sounds, right she's feeling round. She's hungry like an SPW. Rattling swine, this golden wine disagree with her is shame on you. Mouth is contempt, entitled hell that she's hungry like an SPW. Stopping the lecture to a doctor to hide. She's just behind you, people wondering what I do. Red eyes bleeding, full of her eyes of eyes. I feel the heater, it will ban this fight. Screaming at the crowd, her every word yells out, fuck you. Smells like she sounds, like she's doing mouth. She's hungry like an SPW. Rattling swine, if it's rolling wine, disagreeing with her is shame on you. Mouth is contempt, entitled hell that she's hungry like an SPW.
We have an open panel and a Q&A session because we want an open idea.
Oh, I'm a racist. There you go. That's a new one. Where'd you learn that one in Social Human Studies 101?
Right next to the giant, I don't know, wild boar I couldn't see who said there's no such thing as fat chicks. Guess what? If you think there aren't, you are one, okay? Did he just make a fat joke? Yeah, I did. And no, it's okay, because I got some here, so screw you. I have a faggot pass and a fat pass today.
Screaming in the crowd, her every word yells out, fuck you. Smells like she sounds, crunchy to his mouth. She's hungry like an SPW. Rattling swine, it's his holy wine. Disagreeing with her is shame on you. Mouth is contempt, entitled hell that she's hungry like an SPW.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Hope you enjoyed the musical hilarity there. And Now we're going to talk about a little concept I call a UET, or a Universal Exchange Token, and how that works. I got a little explanation I put here. The UET, or Universal Exchange Token, is a hypothetical blockchain protocol which would be designed to link all SMT, social media token, blockchains in order to allow them to easily and instantly exchange between each other. This function is for the purpose of bypassing the current totalitarian deplatforming waged against fair free market competition by the tyrannical big tech corporate monopolies which are currently acting in a state of treason against humanity. As a protocol, rather than a company or website, there's no way for the powers who assume they be to block it off or shut it down. In fact, seeing as each of these powers have their own personal greed prioritized, this system would likely become an irresistible opportunity for websites such as Amazon to create their own private SMT to be able to interchange between rewards points, as well as for credit card companies to do the same for interchange between their own rewards point systems. This would allow for SMT cryptocurrency to be capable of paying towards real-world purchases. Sites such as DeviantArt also already allow a two-way exchange directly between PayPal and their own DeviantArt points system. The creation and development of this or a similar system is absolutely imperative to making the free market truly free again. Otherwise, nothing will be able to stop the monopolies from having absolute and unchecked rule over humanity as per its current dependency on financial systems. And I just want to put a little disclaimer out there for any developers that might decide, to look at this concept and go, hey, great, I want to do that, let's do that. Like, if that happened, awesome, but a little bit of a legal disclaimer. I'm not a lawyer. There's a lot of law, international law, and all sorts of other law that, plays heavily into creating something like this. So if anyone is actually going to create something like this, please have at least one, preferably more than one, lawyer who is really, really, really good with all of the legal shit as pertains to the implications of doing something like this. Because if you do it in such a way that violates a national or international law that you didn't know was there, your ass ends up with like $10 million in fines or in jail or whatever, and the system would love nothing more than to totally ram its dick up your ass. So please, 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 anybody who's going to do something like this, make sure you check every little aspect with qualified lawyers so that you're not getting screwed. So, with that said, moving on. You've got platforms like Minds.com, for example. They've got their own Minds points system, and basically 1,000 Minds points equals 1 Minds token, and the Minds token is currently on the Ethereum blockchain. So the site originally had a point system before it went crypto, and on the Minds site, you earn points, through various levels of your activity and visibility and so on and so forth. You can go to Minds.com and create an account, and they've got all sorts of documentation on that will explain exactly how all of that works. I'm not going to get into all of that right here, right now. You can look that up if you're interested enough. But my point is, most websites these days, at the very least, have their own point systems. Amazon has Amazon rewards points that, you can earn when you make purchases on there, and, you end up earning rewards points. Through making credit card purchases, through Chase and Amazon Express and, so on and so on and so on. As you make purchases on there, you earn rewards points on there. that you can then, use on Amazon or cash out to cash or pay your statement balance or, et cetera and so on. So there's all these different sites that has these systems. Even DeviantArt themselves has a point system. You can use PayPal or a credit card to purchase DeviantArt points, and then you can, donate points to other members, give it to them as gifts, contribute to a donation pool, commission artists with points, and then those people that you give the points to can then in turn, if they would like, exchange those points for real-world currency through linking their account to a PayPal account. They can, go ahead and do that, and bada boom, bada bang, you're going from points back to cash again. So with a universal exchange token, it would be like this in-between protocol that, let's say DeviantArt decided to have their own token system similar to Mine's, and let's say Amazon decided to have their own token system, and American Express decided to have their own token system, whatever. So the points and the tokens for the site are interchangeable with each other, just like Mine's points and Mine's tokens automatically go back and forth. So in this hypothetical scenario, let's say just like Mine's, you have however many DeviantArt points are equivalent to one DeviantArt token. So then all of the different tokens are then interchangeable with the UET. So you can exchange X amount of, different tokens off of different sites for UET. So let's say in this hypothetical scenario, you had a bunch of points earned on DeviantArt, on Mines, on Amazon, this, that, the other, whatever. You've got all these different sites where you've earned points, but you want to make a purchase on one of those sites. So you want to take all of those tokens from all the different sites and pool them towards that one purchase. So you would exchange all those tokens from all those different sites to UET, and then exchange from UET back into the token that's on the site that you're wanting to actually make that purchase on. So then from the token, it goes from UET to that site token to their point system, and then you're paying with the points on the site. And I've done this up as it's a diagram that shows this. So you've got UET website SMT token to website point system, and then you see here like Amazon rewards, Chase Ultimate rewards, Amazon membership rewards. Now also keep in mind, because I am displaying corporate logos and all this here, this is not an advertisement for these companies, nor am I saying that these companies in any way, shape, or form support or endorse this or whatever. This is purely a hypothetical, so don't treat this as real and literal. This is hypothetical. This is something that could be or might be at some point in the future, but this is not something that is. So just wanted to put that out there. So Amazon.com rewards, buy things, pay statement balance. Chase Ultimate rewards, pay statement balance, pay statement balance. Then there's a system called coin payments, where if you can convert between different cryptocurrencies, and then all these different online stores, they've got a list of them on the site, have the shopping cart plugin, where you can pay with coin payments through the shopping cart plugin on these various online stores and so on. So there's already people leaning in the direction of this. There's already sites that sell stuff that as a payment option, you can click use coin payments, and then through the coin payment system, you can pick which other type of crypto you want to use and so on and so forth. So imagine that UET was one of the options on this whole, coin payment system. So and imagine if, seeing as with the coin payment system, it allows you to convert back and forth between all the different sorts of crypto. Imagine if it also a site like that allowed you to go from different tokens to UET and so on and so forth, just on that site. And then of course at the bottom here we have the example of DeviantArt, and then through the DeviantArt points, and all that, obviously, as I explained before, using PayPal and credit cards and so on and so forth. Now when we go up here, SNT token, website point system, so then we're leaning into alt text, so Minds, BitChute, Gab, BitTube, that sort of thing. Minds tokens. BitChute now has the Shoot token. Gab doesn't have a token yet. Maybe at some point they will. BitTube does have a token. It's called TubeCoin. Then, of course, going up here, you've got Subscribestar, and any other platforms that might compete, with things like Patreon. And then, of course, up at the top, just limitless potential, whatever else might unfold as a result of this sort of thing taking place. So this is all just an idea. It's something that is fully possible. It's something that could happen, but only if the right developers, and also with the assistance of the right lawyers, have enough interest in deploying this and doing this. And we need this type of system fucking yesterday, okay? So, it's really urgent that we have this sort of a system. Otherwise, even if we got the fully decentralized technology going and decentralized DNS and all of that, if the cryptocurrency end of things is not also accounted for in the ways that are explained here, then they're still going to be able to deplatform you through your wallet. They're still going to be able to fuck you over on the financial level, even if overall on the technological level you've got all your I's dotted and your T's crossed. So this sort of stuff is absolutely desperately needed. Alrighty, Jasmine, seeing as you need to go a lot sooner rather than later because it's starting to get late, I'll ask you about your thoughts on this first before I ask Richard, because obviously you're kind of more on a time crunch.
I don't think my brain has completely fully grasped or understood most of what you were talking about with the coin system. I think it got lost.
Well, that's okay. When it comes to financial related things, it's pretty easy for people to get lost in it. So you definitely not be alone in that. But I think you at least understand the basic premise of the need for the average person to be able to have financial control without the big tech monopolies and Federal Reserve kind of assholes just being able to stick their dick into everything that you're doing, totalitarianly controlling everybody through finance, like they already do. So I think you at least understand the basic premise of the need for this sort of thing, even if the details of exactly how that sort of thing works is eluding you a bit. Yeah, we need to have that financial freedom. They're just, they're economics screwing us. They're economics screwing us all, and we kind of need to take back our power through taking personal responsibility and developing these sorts of systems instead of trying to beg our evil overlords to do what we want. Because, protest all you want. They're not going to do it. They're just going to laugh and be like, oh, look, they're crying, and they're not willing to do anything themselves or take any action. So we're just going to continue to dick them around because fuck them. Yep. So on that note, I know that you have to go. So
one thing I just remembered, and I want to say before I forget and before I go, is that I don't know if it's still a thing. If it's still a thing, but I wouldn't be surprised if it still is. We were talking about like a year or two ago, I was in this class about personal finance, and I was doing part of the lesson, and my mom said about that you are not allowed to buy a house or something like that unless you have even a little bit of a credit score. I'm like, wait, what? You're like, you oh, like you have been in debt. Like, you cannot buy a house unless you've been in debt. I'm like, wait, what? So,
Yeah, well, when you look at the Federal Reserve System and realize how money is created in the first place, and that the current funny money, monopoly money, fiat money, Ponzi scheme scam that we're dealing with, money is created out of thin air, not only at debt but as debt. It means that money literally is debt. And yeah, you do have to have a high enough credit score, which in other words means going into debt and then paying that money back, which is even more amusing when you think about it. It's like you're paying back debt with debt. It's like, but anyway, yeah, you do have to have a high enough credit score to make larger purchases. Otherwise, the entities that you're trying to make the purchase from are going to see you as, a major credit risk, and they're going to deny you the purchase. So yeah, credit scores are very important.
it's because they're all just money greedy.
Yeah, I mean, unless you've got like all the money to put down up front, or like at the very least a good amount of it. Like, if you wanted to buy, let's say you wanted to buy a house that's like it's $150,000 house, right? And your credit score is lousy. Not that it's necessarily bad, but it's not high enough. Not that you've gotten into trouble, but it's just not high enough. But you have $75,000 to put down now. That will vastly increase your chances of them overlooking the lower credit score, and they're going to be like, all right, it's a $150,000 house. They're literally putting up half the money immediately. So I think we can take a risk on them, because you're having half of that money now. So unless you're in a situation like that, which in this economy, good luck trying to save up $5,000, much less $75,000. So it's hell would probably freeze over before you'd end up in that scenario, unless your life circumstances really change big time. So yeah, your mom's completely correct on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I remember before she told me, I was saying stuff about how I was like, why don't I just save up enough money to where I can just hand over the money to them in cash.
Yeah, you could, but
she was
That was the old-fashioned way of doing things.
I'm like, what? That's stupid.
Back in the Great Depression.
I got so triggered.
During that area.
I got so triggered.
Back during the era of the Great Depression, that was actually a very common thing. In fact, that was kind of the way things were done, because, and this ties into the conversation me and Dave were having last night that was not a PSEC episode, kind of wish it was a short one that we had done, but about the Federal Reserve, the money system, how we got scammed out of the gold and silver standard, how they artificially inflated the amount of gold certificates on the market, and did so because they knew that there wasn't as much gold in supplies. They were pumping out silver and gold certificates, and they artificially devalued things that way to the point.
Well, you know what? It can be a part of this PSEC episode. So for everybody watching,
well, that's what I'm doing right now.
That very video that he's talking about, everybody, we're gonna take a little break and show you that video that he's talking about. So enjoy.
With the Federal Reserve popping up in the news, I thought it might be interesting to explore its history. And while you might think that sounds boring, it's actually a story full of secrets, conspiracies, scandals, fraud, and theft. And it affects you, your livelihood, and future generations. But before we get into the Federal Reserve, for some context, it's important that we go back to the beginning of the American banking system. In 1775, Americans were already struggling from the consequences of centralized banking. Britain had a lot of debt from wars that were funded by the Bank of England, which despite its name is a privately owned centralized bank. To pay back their debt, they were taxing the American colonies and forcing them to use British currency, which America had to borrow with interest. And while there are many reasons cited for the American Revolution, as George Washington said, The refusal of King George III to allow the colonies to operate an honest money system, which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of the money manipulators, was probably the prime cause of the Revolution. By 1781, America was struggling financially because of the war. Backed into a corner, they reluctantly created a privately owned centralized bank based on the Bank of England, ironically the very same bank that the colonies were fighting against. In 1783, America won its independence from England, and the centralized bank was no longer needed. The Founding Fathers were dead set against central banking or any banking that was not backed by gold or silver. Despite this, in 1791, a central bank known as the First Bank of the United States was created, mostly due to Alexander Hamilton's persistence. This bank plunged America into debt and was closed down in 1811. But only a year later, in 1812, America was at war once again, and a second privately owned central bank of the United States was opened by President Madison. However, in 1833, Andrew Jackson, with the encouragement of the American people, used his executive power to close down the central bank. On January 8, 1935, the United States was officially debt-free and actually running a surplus for the first and last time in American history. Of course, the bankers in England could not stand this, and they did whatever it took to sabotage Jackson, which arguably led to the financial panic in 1837. It's alleged that before Jackson died, when asked what his greatest achievement was, he said, "I killed the bank." So it's a terrible irony that his face is now on a Federal Reserve note. In 1900, the Gold Standard Act was passed. This tied the US dollar to gold, and this makes sense as gold has been a valuable, rare, desirable, and stable commodity for thousands of years. Because of this, it's also dangerous to carry gold around, so naturally people would want to put it in the bank for safekeeping, and when they did, they would get a paper receipt in exchange that looked like this. This receipt could be slapped down at the bank at any time, and you would receive the equivalency in gold. There was trust in the system because, as the colloquial term goes, these receipts were as good as gold. However, it's very important to note that these two things are not the same. This piece of paper representing gold is currency. It's a unit that merely represents value and can become diluted if too much is made. The actual gold is money, as it possesses a value, is limited, and maintains its purchasing power over a long period of time. Currency backed by gold and silver or anything else of consistent value makes sense. Without something of value to back it up, currency is just paper that can be easily printed at will and devalued. In 1907, financial panic hit. Some historians believe that this was caused by the banker and robber baron J.P. Morgan spreading rumors about the Knickerbocker Trust Company, one of Morgan's competitors. These rumors caused the National Bank of Commerce to stop accepting checks, which triggered a run of people demanding back their funds. This resulted in the stock market falling almost 50% from the previous year. Morgan then swooped in and offered to rescue some of the faltering banks, and he looked like the hero who saved the day, even though he likely orchestrated the entire crisis. Why would he do this? Well, this led to both political parties believing that the American banking system needed to be reformed and safeguarded from powerful banking organizations. And so the National Monetary Commission was created to find a better system. This is where the story of the Federal Reserve began. Under the cover of darkness on November 22, 1910 in New Jersey, 7 mysterious figures boarded a private railcar belonging to Rhode Island Senator Nelson Aldrich. Aldrich just happened to be the chairman of the National Monetary Commission and the father-in-law of J.D. Rockefeller, the heir to the Rockefeller dynasty. Under the ruse of a duck hunting trip, these 7 supposed strangers had been instructed to arrive separately to avoid reporters, and should they meet inside the station, they should pretend they didn't even know each other. After boarding the train, they had been told to use first names only, so not even the servants on the train knew their true identities. This train was headed to Jekyll Island, Georgia, and this meeting was likely set up by J.P. Morgan, as he was a member of the elite Jekyll Island Club. Along with Aldrich was Abraham Piet Andrew, who was the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury, Frank Anderlip, the President of the National City Bank of New York, Henry Davidson, the Senior Partner of J.P. Morgan Company, Charles Norton, who was the President of the First National Bank of New York, Benjamin Strong, the head of J.P. Morgan's Bankers Trust Company, who would later become the first head of the Federal Reserve, and finally German-born Paul Warburg, a partner at Kuhn Loeb & Co., who was a representative of the Rothschild banking dynasty in England and France and one of the wealthiest men in the world, whose brother owned the banks in Germany and the Netherlands. So all these big banks that were competition were coming together to form a cartel and to create the foundation of what would become the Federal Reserve. But why did this banking cabal need such secrecy? Well, Frank Anderlip later answered this question in an article by saying, "If it were to be exposed publicly that our particular group had got together and written a banking bill, that bill would have had no chance whatsoever of passage by Congress," which is true, because at the time the government was seeking reform to break the grip of the bankers. But little did they know that they were about to pass a bill created by those very bankers, giving them control over the American money supply and allowing them to self-regulate their industry. The Federal Reserve was chartered by an act of deceit and was passed on December 23, 1913, when most of Congress had gone home for Christmas holidays. In fact, only 3 senators were there, and the act passed with a unanimous vote. If there had been just one person present in absence of a quorum, that bill would not have passed. It was then unwittingly signed by President Wilson, who was strongly against centralized banking. This was a con job from the very beginning. The Federal Reserve Act created a new era of fractional reserve banking, where they could print more currency than they had gold to back it up, as long as they had at least 40% of gold in reserve for the amount of currency in rotation, meaning that they could put out $50 as long as they had $20 worth of gold in reserve. And you can try to justify this by saying that inflation helps stimulate economic growth, but at the end of the day, they were giving receipts to people for something that they didn't have. That's fraud. It's also rumored that around this time, bankers were investing in media to control public opinion. In 1915, Congressman Oscar Callaway demanded an investigation into J.P. Morgan & Co. for purchasing control over 25 of America's leading newspapers in order to propagandize the public opinion in favor of banking interests and U.S. participation in the war. Why would the banks want war? Because wars cost a lot of money to fund, and that money comes from loans from the bank. And while it's said that the Federal Reserve is supposed to help balance the market and prevent financial panics like the one in 1907, there's been more recessions and economic turmoil since the Federal Reserve was created than there was before. In fact, not long after the Fed's creation in 1929, the stock market crashed and America sunk into the Great Depression. Some economists believe that this was actually caused by significant policy mistakes made by the Federal Reserve.
What do you think of the Federal Reserve Board today? Well, I have long been in favor of abolishing it. I think there is no institution in the United States that has such a high public standing and such a poor record of performance. The Federal Reserve Board was established, Federal Reserve System was established in 1914, started operation in 1914. It presided over a doubling of prices during World War I. It produced a major collapse in 1921. It had a good period from about 1922 to about 28. Then it undertook actions which led to a recession in 1929 and 30. And it converted that recession by its actions into the Great Depression. The major villain in the Great Depression was, in my opinion, unquestionably, the Federal Reserve System.
So at this point, people stopped trusting the banks and began to hoard their gold. By 1933, the market was overflowing with far too many receipts for the amount of actual gold in reserve. And as people came to the banks to collect their gold in a panic, this quickly became an issue. When FDR came into power, he immediately responded with this executive order, forcing people to turn in all gold coins, bullions, and gold certificates in exchange for paper currency, or they would go to jail for 10 years. The excuse used for this was to stop gold hoarding, but the main economic rationale behind the order was so that the Federal Reserve would have more gold and could therefore legally print more currency. The very next year, in 1934, the government passed the Gold Reserve Act, further outlawing the private possession of gold, and they changed the price of gold to incentivize foreign investors to export more gold into the United States. This simultaneously caused rapid devaluation of the American dollar. But these acts were great for the Fed because if the American people can't possess gold, then they can't redeem it from the banks. The foreign gold exports and the national gold confiscation resulted in a large accumulation of gold for the Fed, and this stimulus led to lower interest rates. However, the whole thing was absolute theft of the American people for the benefit of the banks. Near the end of World War II, America had 2/3 of the world's gold, and in 1944 the Bretton Woods system came into play, which tied almost all of the world's currency to the US dollar, backed by gold. This caused a fixed exchange rate and world trade to boom. And this was great until the 1950s, when the government went into major debt because of the Korean and Vietnam Wars. And the Fed once again started to flood the world with more paper money than it had gold to back it up. In 1963, JFK issued Executive Order 1110, which gave the Treasury Department the explicit authority to issue debt-free silver certificates. And this could have drained the power of the Federal Reserve. A few months later, he was assassinated. Now, I'm not saying that these two things are necessarily connected. There's a lot of conspiracy theories about JFK's assassination. But what is interesting is that soon after his death, the redemption of silver dollars was halted. Also, John McCloy, who was the former president of the World Bank and a longtime friend of the Rockefeller family, was placed on the Warren Commission, which investigated JFK's assassination. McCloy said that all conspiracy theories regarding JFK's death were just nonsense. Alright then, case closed. In 1965, the president of France, Charles de Gaulle, called America's gold bluff and traded his US dollar reserves back for gold. Other countries followed Charles de Gaulle's lead, and by 1971, the US had lost about half of its gold. At this point, the United States had about 12 times more paper currency than it had gold in reserve. In 1971, Nixon was forced to end the direct convertibility of the US dollar to gold, because if gold reserves had gone to zero, the worldwide monetary system would have collapsed.
I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
Now, instead of gold, U.S. gold certificates could only be redeemed for Federal Reserve notes. This was allegedly only supposed to be a temporary measure, but of course it wasn't, as they're still being used today nearly 50 years later. This was the year the U.S. dollar became fiat currency, which is money made legal tender by government decree. The only thing it's backed by is the trust in the banks, the government, and the taxation of its citizens, meaning that money is now backed by debt. Now, the Fed, a privately owned entity, has the ability to print money at will without requiring gold reserves to back it up. But if I print money, I go to jail. How is that fair? In 2008, we saw the housing market collapse. The crash happened because the banks were selling subprime mortgages to people who obviously had no way to back it up. They were also bundling these mortgages with low-risk securities in order to hide how toxic they were. That's a crime. That's fraud. Give a man a gun and he can rob a bank. Give a man a bank and he can rob the world. The Federal Reserve then raised interest rates, which collapsed the bubble. Yet only one big Wall Street banker went to jail for this. There's simply little to no accountability for their actions, as they're seemingly untouchable.
Well, first of all, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and that means basically that there is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take.
After the 2008 recession, the Federal Reserve was used as a medium to bail out the very same bankers who control the Federal Reserve banks. When the banks demanded billion-dollar bailouts from the government, where do you think that money came from? The Federal Reserve. So by handing money to the banks, America simultaneously became more indebted to them. The same bank presidents who oversaw the poor lending practices of their banks ended up in the positions of deciding where the trillions of dollars in bailout money went. And where did it go? Towards their own banks. That's got to be the biggest conflict of interest I've ever heard of. And it's not that big of a stretch to think that maybe this crisis could have been orchestrated intentionally. And while the Fed claims that they're subject to audits, the present audit process exempts the Fed's most crucial activities. This is evident by this clip of former Florida Rep. Alan Grayson asking former Fed Chair Ben Bernanke where $500 billion went.
So who got the money?
To financial institutions in Europe and other countries.
Which ones?
I don't know.
$500 billion, and you don't know who got the money? Well, let's start with which central banks got the money.
There are 14 of them, which are listed in our, I'm sure they're listed in here somewhere.
All right, we actually looked at one of the arrangements, and one of the arrangements is $9 billion for New Zealand. That works out to $3,000 for every single person who lives in New Zealand. Seriously, wouldn't it have been better to extend that kind of credit to Americans rather than New Zealanders? The very next page has the U.S. dollar nominal exchange rate, which shows a 20% increase in the U.S. dollar nominal exchange rate at exactly the same time that you were handing out $500 billion to foreigners. Do you think that's a coincidence?
Yes. Congress approved it in the Federal Reserve Act.
When was that?
Quite a long time ago. I don't know the exact date.
100 years ago?
The original act is 1914, I believe.
I don't know whether this provision was in 1914 or not, but the Federal Reserve Act was in 1913.
All right, and at that time, the entire gross national product of this country was well under $500 billion, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Is it safe to say that nobody in 1913 contemplated that your small little group of people would decide to hand out $500 billion to foreigners?
Now, if it's your job to know where money is going, and someone asks you where $500 billion went, and you reply with, "I don't know," maybe you shouldn't have that job. In 2009, after the financial crisis, former Senator Ron Paul tried to create a Federal Reserve Transparency Act, which included a reformed audit of the Fed.
The best answer I have about defending my bill is asking a question. Why not? I mean, why in the world should this much power be given to a Federal Reserve that has the authority to create $1 trillion secretly? And Congress says nothing. I mean, why not?
In 2015, a similar bill was created by his son, Rand Paul, but for some reason it wasn't passed in the U.S. Senate. Any politician or journalist saying that the Fed shouldn't be audited is probably bought and paid for.
That bill was covered more territory than I think it should have. I did not vote for it, but I don't know that we, Congress and the public, should be completely having a political impact on monetary policy.
It's no surprise that the biggest lobbying group against banking transparency, government oversight, and the Fed being audited is the Federal Reserve itself. And while the Fed is a private financial institution that claims to be politically neutral, they've always had the ability to manipulate politics because they control the economy. If you look at the interest rates under George Bush, and then Obama, and then President Trump, you might notice an interesting pattern. Any privately owned entity that has that much power is a danger to democracy. Because as Thomas Jefferson said, banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies. During Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, he stated how he supports auditing the Fed.
In my opinion, the Fed has become extremely political. I don't think they would do, I really believe if it was a political decision or the right decision, they're going to go with the political decision every single time.
Trump has now been actively criticizing the Federal Reserve by tweeting the only problem our economy has is the Fed. He's also said that Fed Chairman Jerome Powell is threatening U.S. economic growth by further raising interest rates. So there's been rumors swirling about Trump potentially wanting to fire Powell. And I've seen several journalists who are unsure if he can actually do that because they say it's simply never been done before.
We're in completely uncharted waters. No president has ever tried to remove a member of the Federal Reserve's board, let alone a chairman, for any reason at any time. So this is an incredibly theoretical discussion about what the law says. We're in uncharted waters. No one's tried it before.
But that's fake news, as President Truman's Fed chairman was forced to resign. And to imply that the president is unable to remove the person that they appointed to the Fed would mean that the Federal Reserve is operating without America's best interest in mind and has far too much power. And if the Federal Reserve Act can be passed by Congress, then so could an act requiring transparency, audits, and stricter controls, or an entirely different monetary system like Kennedy tried to create. Now, there are great arguments to be made for having central banking, but we have to admit that it's hard to trust the Fed based on their history, and maybe it's time that we pull back the curtain and reveal that the great and powerful laws is just a man pulling the strings. Because in summary, the Federal Reserve, which is not federal nor does it have any reserves, was created by a cartel of bankers who tricked the government into signing their act. It's been alleged that they've used the media to push for wars and manipulate politics in their favor. They've also committed massive fraud and stole all of the gold from the American people and the rest of the world, and then replaced it with paper that they can legally print on demand. Fiat currency always fails for this reason, because at this point, paying back the debt is actually impossible, because when the Fed creates money out of nothing and loans that money to the government, they charge interest, meaning that there will never be enough money in circulation to back up the debt to the Fed. Every dollar that the Fed creates that isn't backed by something of value robs purchasing power from the dollars that are already in existence. Because of this, the US dollar has lost 95% of its purchasing power since 1913. And while there is so much more that I could say and reveal about the Federal Reserve in order to keep this video from dragging on, in summary, the Federal Reserve is the greatest scam ever created.
Okay, welcome back. So now that that's clarified, our conversation can continue.
So anyway, as the video goes into, they talk about how, the whole debt scam and the money laundering and all of the bullshit that the Federal Reserve has been caught on record doing. And it's kind of funny to watch them sit there in Congress nervously sweating because they know that they're a criminal organization and that they're all a bunch of criminals who should be Nuremberged and maybe given a little dose of Zyklon B on the side. Zyklon B likes to listen for Juden. It used to be a practice, common practice. My grandparents on my mother's side, in fact, we've talked about this several times. Back in the 1940s, my grandparents had saved up for a brand new car. And mind you, back during World War II, cars were like almost impossible to get, if not, like unheard of to find, because everything was going towards the war effort. They were wanting to build airplanes and tanks and ships, and they were using all the metal they could for those sorts of items and those sorts of things. So common, civilian luxury sedans and cars and things of that nature were really hard to come by. And production levels on that stuff were at an all-time low. Anyway, they bought a brand new car. They paid, I want to say like $1,000 cash for it, or whatever the cash equivalent value was back then. And $1,000 in the 1940s was a lot of money. That's equivalent to anywhere between 35 and 40 grand today, which is what you would pay for a nice car, a brand new car.
The house I'm living in right now, which is a really big, nice house, back in those days, would have sold for around 10 grand, and now this house is worth upwards of over 200,000. So just to give people that kind of an idea.
Right, the devaluation of the dollar and the rising inflation rates. Yeah, inflation rates rise like 3 times as much as the standard, pay rate. As the dollar, everybody wants to praise Donald Trump because the economy is good and more people have money in their pocket. Well, what people don't want to look at in the Trump community is that, okay, yeah, more Americans are making more money, barely more than they were making under the Obama administration, if you call that more. But, okay, they haven't raised the taxes. They've kept them at the same levels, but they have raised interest rates yet again. So here goes Mr. Inflation. And guess what inflation does? It just devalues the money that you already have, meaning you have to work more to make more than you're already making. So it's really a moot point. Just because you're making more money doesn't mean jack, because they're compensating for it by raising inflation levels. And right now the Federal Reserve is printing even more money and giving out more loans and doing a very similar thing to what they were doing before the 2008 crash. Sound familiar?
They say that, oh, this is the best economy ever. Bullshit. You have to work longer and harder to make less money to buy things that are the most expensive than they've ever been. Like even at Walmart, which has some of the cheapest prices out there, even at Walmart, the prices keep getting jacked up relative to what they were even 10 years ago. It's like prices have almost doubled in the last 10 years. So it's like, what the fuck? This is the greatest economy ever? No. You want to know what the greatest economy ever was, if we're going to talk about it? The 1960s was like the height of American prosperity, financially and otherwise. And then afterwards came Nixon's New Deal. I mean, the Federal Reserve was already starting to fuck things. Obviously, things were worth less in the 60s than they were in the 40s and so on, and that inflation. But as far as the amount of money that people were making versus the prices of things versus what you could buy versus the prosperity and jobs and all that, the balance between all of those factors, the balance was the absolute best in the 60s. That's when it reached its prosperity height. Since then, it's been just straight down the toilet progressively from that point forward.
You will never find shit in my toilet because I shit in the sink because it's easier to clean. It's true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but anyway, going back to the cars and things of that nature that my grandparents invested in, $800 to $1,000 put down on a car. It might have even been less than that. It might have been like $500, but even still, it was a lot of money. $500 was nothing to shake a fist at back then. That was quite a bit of cash, throwing a $500 5 bills down, or one $500 bill if you happen to have one of those, have a McKinley laying around. And yes, they did make them. You can look them up. Or, a magical picture will pop up on the screen and Dave will illustrate what I'm talking about. Front obverse and then the reverse of a $500 bill. That would be an easy enough Wikipedia image to just plop into the video. Insert image here. Anyway, yeah, you saw what I was just talking about right now, Mr. Troll. Anyway, so, you could put that $500 bill down or, 5 Ben Franklins or whatever, you could get that car. But anyway, the car dealership, considering they were able to get the car, which was a miracle back then, they asked them if they could showcase that show model until the end of the war. My grandparents agreed. And that car stayed on the showroom floor for, 3 years, just as an example of what you could buy at the time. And, once the war was over, they were able to take their car and, use it. I mean, a car like that now, in mint factory condition, you could take that to one of the big motor auctions, where they sell all of those mint condition classic cars from back in the day. You could probably sell it for at least $500,000 just because of the year it was and the fact that they didn't make very many of them. And, everything that was being churned out in World War II was either Willys Jeeps or Sherman tanks or Studebaker Deuce and a Half trucks or, what have you. It wasn't, civilian sedan coupes, They just weren't making that sort of stuff. There was too much going on. There was too much at the national interest at stake, I mean, they were churning out so many M1 Garands that International Harvester was making their own M1 Garands, and those guns are worth some money. IBM, International Business Machine, was making 1911s. They were making M1 Garands. They were making Thompsons. They were making all sorts of stuff. Nobody had time to make all of the stuff that we take for granted now, But anyway, yeah, that was a common practice back then. But instead of, doing what people do now, where it's like, oh yeah, take out a loan, go down to the car dealership and take a loan, from the bank or whoever the bank is that they go through. People would walk in and say, I want to buy this car, full cash. They'd lay the cash on the table. They'd count the cash, obviously, and say, and have them sign the papers and do all the legal work and go, yep, car's yours, paid for. But now we have such a fetish in this country because the wonderful, illustrious people at the Federal Reserve have said, no, you must take loans. You need to have a credit card score in order to be able to do anything. You need to be in debt in order to be able to advance. We can't have you doing abundance-based economy-style economics where it's like instead of walking in with, say you wanted to walk into the Dodge Mopar store and you wanted to buy a brand new 2018 Dodge Challenger with all of the bells and whistles, the top of the line, the biggest engine, the biggest everything, all of the, nooks and crannies, all the good stuff, the touch screen navigation.
Antifa's favorite car.
That's right. Custom paint job, the little badges on the side, the whole 9 yards. You'd be looking at maybe 50 to 70 grand, somewhere in that range. You know, you'd be paying some good money for all the bells and whistles, all the factory options. But, you know, it would be an uncommon practice now and almost frowned upon to walk in with $75,000 cash, cold hard cash, which is unheard of, you know, and just place it on the table and say, I would like that car right there. And then having the salesman going, oh, yeah, you know. Instead, they would want you to go back and put it in as a loan. And it's like, well, why would I want to put it in as a loan? I've got the cash right here. Well, we can't guarantee the cash. You know, it's like, oh, so, you know, they'll make excuses like that. I mean, you know, it's almost frowned upon now to walk in with cold hard money and put it on the table and say, I want that thing right there. You know, they would rather you go into a bank or have you go through a bank and, you know, take out a $75,000 loan, which wouldn't make any sense because you've got the cash in front of you. Why do you need to take the loan? It's just another one of those ridiculous things, you know, but that's the kind of society we live in. We're a nation controlled by bankers, for bankers, and of bankers, instead of by the people, for the people, and with the people. It's
as I like to say, land of the thief, home of the slave.
You know, used to be a common practice. You could go in. No, got to zoom out a little bit. Don't want to get too close to the camera or then my screen goes black. But, you know, common practice, you used to be able to take one of those blue seals, silver certificate, insert image here, and, you know, you could exchange it. This isn't a perfect example, but you could get 1 ounce, $1 silver coin, you know, for a $1 silver certificate. It was, you know, was that system perfect? No, it wasn't perfect. You know, no financial system, no matter how well thought out, is perfect. You know, there were the inevitable downsides, but it was light years ahead of where we're at now, and it was far better. And I think we would be wise as a country and as a planet to go into that sort of financial system again. And with modern technology, we really don't have an excuse. You could tie that sort of system in with cryptocurrency. You could try that stuff in with decentralization. You could have, you know, really cool notes with special weaved paper. Me and Dave specifically has brought this one up where you could have, you know, gold thread encrusted into the note itself. You could have, you know, a holographic sort of look to really verify the authenticity, would make it impossible to counterfeit. And, you know, you would be able to verify the authenticity just by looking at it, you know, and have, you know, your traditional gold, silver, you know, and all the precious metal denominations and coinage, you know, and have cryptocurrency and have all of that sort of stuff, you know. But those are the kind of things that the globalists have feared since time immemorial, because it's based on reality. It's not based on what they say it is. Fiat, it shall be. You know, it's actually based on tangible things you can look at, see, hold, touch, smell, you know, put in your mouth and bite on, you know, like the old miner's tale where you could tell it was gold if you could bend it in your mouth, but it would have to be 24 karat gold. Anybody trying that with U.S. mint coins is going to be sorely disappointed and going to ruin a perfectly good coin, and I would bitch slap them if they did that, because it's 18 carats, it's not 24 carats. So don't take your gold eagle and put it in your mouth and try biting it. You just ruined a coin, especially if it's a collectible one. I'm really going to beat you over the head with a sledgehammer, you know. But yeah, if you were to take like a 24 karat gold ingot or something and push your fingers into it, it would literally depress. It's literally that soft. It's malleable. But anyway, that's a totally different topic. But anyway, yeah, it's totally a scam. You know, it's all just a bloody scam that they control and, you know, try to convince us that that's just the way it is.
Jasmine needs to put a flashlight up under her chin and go, I see stupid people.
I see stupid people.
She's all in the dark.
Oh, she's going to do it. He's going to do it. She needs to get, like, braces. When she finally gets braces. Oh.
You're muted.
When she finally does, yeah, you are muted.
So if you were saying anything, it didn't come through. You're muted.
Dang it. I thought I had. I see stupid people.
Yeah. I was just gonna say it'd be really funny. Like she gets orthodontic work done, and then like instead of just standard braces, they're like gold braces. Like the little tiny squares are made of actual gold. I would just call her Jaws from one of the James Bond movies, Moonraker. He's got like these diamond encrusted teeth, or like titanium teeth. And Jaws would bite into people. Yeah, you need to watch some of the Bond movies. They're pretty funny, especially Roger Moore. They're really cheesy. Roger Moore's cheesy. I mean, it's kind of cringe. A lot of his movies were really cringe, but they were made in the late 70s, mid to late 70s, early 80s. But they're kind of tongue in cheek. But yeah, Jaws had these teeth, and they were just they were indestructible teeth. He would kill his enemies by biting them.
I'm titanium. Quite literally.
Anyway, that would be kind of cool to have braces that had little. I'm going to be getting braces not too long from now.
Out of respect for Jasmine's wishes, it is 2:24 a.m. her time at the moment saying this. We don't want to keep her longer than she wants to be, so if she has any closing thoughts that she wants to say, and then off to dreamland she goes.
I don't think I have any closing thoughts.
Alrighty, well, she's gonna duck out now then and go to bed. For anybody wanting to, drop her a note or look at her art or see what she's up to, she's on DeviantArt as Sticker Does Stuff 24/7 as seen on the screen.
Oh, and also, my YouTube channel is searchable now. Finally. I have a YouTube channel that is finally searchable. I've had it for like a few years, but it's never been like it's only just now gotten to where you can search it and it pops up.
So you can search by name?
Yes.
By what name?
Sticker Space Does Stuff 24/7.
All right. Well, you can type in the chat how it's supposed to be searched out, and we'll go ahead and put that up on the screen so that people can see what you're showing us. Okay, cool. Well, I guess DeviantArt and YouTube then. So, love you, appreciate you. Catch you later. Oh, you get another thing?
I'm on this. I don't know how many people are going to know about this website, but it's called Quartel. It's this website where you can make quizzes, novels, and just some stuff.
Well, you definitely might want to type that in, because I don't know how that would even be spelled or what to do with that. So you're going to have to put that in the chat so I can put it up on the screen.
Well, the thing is, I don't really know how the links for that work either, but I don't know if you can actually search any creators or people on there, but I guess just in case, it's just the same as my YouTube channel name.
The same as your YouTube channel, but then how do you actually spell the site?
Oh, the site, okay.
Okay, so is that like .com?
Yes.
Is that like .com.net, .og.y, like what?
Quartel.com.
All right.
And I think I saw somewhere where you could do a slash user thing.
All right.
But it may have been somewhere else. I don't know.
Well, we'll figure that out and put that on the screen, as it's on the screen right now as people are watching, because we're just like time travelers, motherfucker. We are like Doctor. We've got a DeLorean. Yeah, not really, but video editing. It is what it is. Yeah, right. We've got time-traveling video editing technology, okay? So that's why we can talk about it not being up on the screen yet, and it is up on the screen simultaneously, because we are that good. We are that fucking good.
Caden Live DeLorean Edition.
Yeah, there you go. Caden Live DeLorean Edition. Only under Linux, because Linux, not only does it not have spyware and malware and viruses and all that, it's got time travel, motherfucker. It's got fucking time travel.
Insert flames and explosions here. Thanks, Michael Bay.
L-Pars Linux on the Starship Enterprise, alright?
Have a slow-mo Megan Fox running through the screen, tits bouncing up slow motion and more explosions in the background. Jesus Christ, Michael Bay, enough. We're done. Too many explosions and too much side boob.
Yeah, I'm not gonna rip the copyright flag on that one, so, but people can use their imagination.
Well, yeah, you start bringing up time travel, then, yeah, all kinds of funny things start happening.
Just put in like a doctor.
Anyway, good night, Jasmine. You need sleep.
Appreciate you. Catch you later. Have a good night. Off the dream with you.
My time is limited, too. I would like to wind down sooner or later.
It's all good. So, yeah, I don't think I really have anything more to say on all of this right now, because we basically said all that needs to be said for the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I guess all else that I can really think to say is I hope to God that some developers, for whatever reason, decide to watch this and resonate with our points, and maybe we inspire them into thinking, oh yeah, systems like this do need to be we've needed them as of like fucking yesterday, and that this stuff is important, and hopefully somebody out there with the skill and the know-how and the lawyers and everything else decides to take it seriously and do it, because it's our own fault if we end up locked down into a totalitarian shithole. It's not the psychopaths at the top's fault. It's our own, refusal to do what needs to be done, while simultaneously we know that it needs to be done, and it's just like too emotionally and psychologically painful to look at. No, can't look at that. Well, alright, you want to doom humanity to a totalitarian shithole, then whatever. None of us can bitch if it ends up going that way, because we have the full capability to avoid that. And if we don't avoid that, and we keep insisting on worshiping Trump, or worshiping Hillary, or worshiping celebrities, or worshiping whatever, then it's our own damn stupid fault for sending humanity down the toilet. Not George Soros' fault, not anybody else's fault, but our fault. So, yeah.
Indeed.
So, I guess that's it. Obviously, you can be reached at generaltate.deviantart.com. And if you're watching this video, then chances are you already know how to get a hold of me.
Oh, yeah. generaltate.deviantart.com, usmctate.youtube.com, or however the hell you find it on
It's
YouTube.
not .youtube, it's youtube.com/USMCtate.
Yeah, youtube.com/USMCtate. I'm there.
On mine.
Facebook.com, Richard Hamilton. That's my name.
You're also on Minds.
I'm on Minds. Yep. General Tate. Yep. Minds.com/General Tate. I'm there. But yeah, I'm in multiple places.
Yep, you are omnipresent.
Indeed.
But nobody worship him, because you're retarded if you do.
Well, I'd have to put on the gold armor and say, they seem to think I'm some sort of god.
Yeah. And they have like a golden, keck head on. Ow. Oh. Anyway. Yeah.
Tell them if you do not use your power, if they do not do as you wish, you will become angry and use your magic. But Master Luke, what magic? Just tell them.
All right. Well, I guess you've chosen the outro music video for us then, with the Star Wars references. So everybody enjoy, and catch you all later.
This is Admiral Biatch to base camp. It seems the stormtroopers have gone on strike, and I have no experience with this type of shit. Who should I call for help?
It's the B to the A to the D-E-R. Reconstructing the Death Star with my slick suede suit that's black like tar. Fucking you up no matter who you are. Tell the motherfuckers about to see a dark side. Pull up on your planet Death Star, drive by. Them evil rebels cause their skills ain't shit. Get my TIE fighter zigzag, stay lit. Oh shit! Yoda on the scene, 900-year fiend, smoking Dagobah green. Bitches on my tip like Lando on liquor.
Aw, you're just jealous cause my black dick's thicker. Yo, tell him Chewie last night I had Leia all drunk, one to do me.
Shut the fuck up, man, Leia's my sister. The only thing you're getting is a beat-off blister.
Luke, use the Force before intercourse, but Luke, don't forget, bitches ain't nothing but hoes and tricks.
Obi-Wan, I'm the Top Gun. The chosen one, hotter than both sons. Vader ain't shit, his head's cut up and split. He's slower than the first Pentium chip.
Shit. The one brings it worse in this fucking universe.
Rebel. You know we'll fucking win, cause we'll fight till the end.
I can feel the anger dwelling within you.
Rebel.
You also feel Vader's dick in you, biatch. Piecza konżuna, gdzie sama tierra, bunda la fiesta, canto Jaboody.
Jabba, you ain't nothing but a fat-ass slug. Fake gold chains, you sorry-ass thug. Sitting in your palace with your blue-headed whore. Trapdoor to the Rancor.
Oh, my goodness gracious me. I'm a gay man's golden fantasy. Programmed for homo ecstasy. 10 million forms of gay positioning. For my golden shower, you must pay a fee. But R2-D2 gives it up for free. R2-D2, what's your language? Always having sex with robotic strangers. These are like